Boa tarde a todos. Estou aqui aguardando Philippe Marion, diretor da Barton Guestier. Muito obrigado aí pelo prestígio, pela audiência, por estarem comigo hoje à tarde. Ele vai entrar em 1 minuto. Vamos falar hoje sobre Bordeaux. Barton Guestier, que é um dos mais antigos negociantes de Bordeaux. Eu acho que a marca mais antiga de Bordeaux. Vou perguntar isso a ele mais especificamente. Opa, Roberto, tudo bom? Bem-vindo, pessoal, que está entrando agora. Só aguardando eles entrarem. Estou adicionando aqui. Hello, Philippe. You are upside down.
Yes. Hi, Marcelo. How are you?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, Philippe. My friends, we are with Philippe Marion, Director of Sales and Marketing of the Barton Guestier Group. Philippe, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Boa tarde.
Are you in Bordeaux now?
Yes. Yes, I am.
How is it? Summer?
Very warm. Extremely warm at the moment. We had no rain for more than a month. So the vineyard is starting to slow down a little bit in its development, which is good also because we had a lot of mildew during the spring. So now with the dry weather, we are able to catch up on the quality of the vines.
Okay, so can we expect a good 2020 vintage?
So far, so good. But as we say in Bordeaux, you know, September makes the vintage.
Yes.
So June makes the quantity, and the quality is made in September during the harvest. If it rains during the harvest, it dilutes the wine. So you know, it's very important to have a dry and beautiful September to make sure we have a good wine.
So let's hope that the rain doesn't show up this year.
Exactly.
Now, first, I was telling people before you get in that Barton Guestier is one of the oldest marchands or negociants and brands from Bordeaux. Can you tell a little bit of Barton Guestier history?
Yes, that's true. So B&G was basically created, I would say, in 1725, so a very long time ago, almost 300 years ago, by an Irishman called Thomas Barton, who came from Ireland. He was looking at creating a business to make money. And basically, wine at the time was a good way to make money. And he came to Bordeaux and invested his time and efforts in selecting wines and shipping them over to Ireland and England. So it was originally the Barton family. He gave the business to his grandson, and his grandson, Hugh Barton, made an association with a Frenchman, and the Frenchman called Guestier managed to ship the wines. He had the boats, he had the ships to carry the wines over to England, Ireland, then Holland, and soon the US and South America as well. So beginning of the 19th century, B&G was already one of the largest wine merchants in Bordeaux. Then during the whole of the 19th century, the company developed, mainly in the US and in the Anglo-Saxon world. And until 1954, it remained in the Barton family. 1954, there is a big company, a big group, who is called Seagram, who invested in B&G. In 1954, Seagram bought 3 companies at the same time: B&G, Martel Cognac, and Perrier-Jouët Champagne. So the reason why they bought 3 companies was to secure their needs for the North American market, especially for New York. And then B&G was moving from a family business into a big group. And since 1954 until the end of Seagram's in 2001, B&G was a big part of the Seagram portfolio in wine. In 2001, Seagram was sold partly to Diageo. So B&G was then part of Diageo for 10 years. And eventually, in 2010, Diageo sold B&G. And it was sold to one of the largest wine groups in the world today, called Castel. So today, B&G is an independent company within the Castel constellation, as we could say.
Yes, fantastic history. And you mentioned that when Thomas Barton started, it was a good time to make money in wine. And what do you think now? Is it a good time to make money in wine?
It's a very good question. If you are selling bag-in-box in the French market, yes. If you're selling high-priced wines to restaurants, that's another story, to be honest. The market has shifted a lot in the last 6 months. It's quite incredible. I think wine is a passion. You're not investing in wine to make money. You're investing in wine because you believe that you have a beautiful product and you want to make people discover your product. You're not going to make money in wine. We know that for sure. Even our owner made his money in beer, selling beer in Africa. And most of the other companies, like Diageo, for example, in 10 years of B&G, they said, in the end, we make much more money in spirits than we do making wine. So in the end, they sold the wine business. So So I don't believe that you make money in selling wine. I believe that you make friends, you make good wine, and then you wonder how you're going to sell it.
Sure. We have a lot of professionals getting in here. I just say hello to Junior Dusky. Hello, Junior. Welcome. And a lot of people here admire your brand. And it's a brand built through almost 300 years. Now, how many millions of bottles you produce?
We produce about, altogether, about 15 million bottles. Mm-hmm. Among these 15 million, about 12 million are branded B&G. Mm-hmm. We also produce 3 million bottles for other customers, which are not branded. But most of our wines are branded B&G. And again, in the last 6 months, we saw a big shift in the countries where we were selling. We have tremendous problems in the US at the moment for several reasons. One is the COVID, of course, but also the Trump tax, which is 25%
yes,
on wines, and that's causing us a lot of problems on the US market at the moment. But overall, the brand is healthy. My plan was to see a decrease in sales of around 25% with the COVID. Right now, we are trending -9. So let's say that we are doing better than planned. Of course, it's more difficult than last year. We know that. But overall, we managed to grow in some of the markets and change a little bit the way we make business. We don't travel anymore. We're doing videos and Insta Live, and it's a bit of a change of way of making things.
Well, I think you have the whole line that covers all the market, from the entry-level varietals to the Grand Cru Classés. You have wines from several regions: Bourgogne, Loire, I see here, Beaujolais, Rhône, Provence, Languedoc, Gascony, and the star, of course, Bordeaux. So in any case, you always have a wine to a customer. No better the customer, you have a right wine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's one of the strengths of the company. I think it's due to the fact we're in business with wine growers for almost ever, and some growers, for example, we are doing business with 2 or 3 or 4 generations of growers from the same family, and this has given access to us for rare wines like Châteauneuf-du-Pape, for example. It's a wine which is difficult to source. Sancerre is also a wine which is difficult to source. And we do that because we've been doing business with those people for a long time. And that's also part of our history, and that's what makes a difference.
Yeah, I remember 2 years ago in Provence, I tasted with Barton Guestier folks, Leoville Barton, 1964 in Magnum. So you still keep these bottles? Is it a big business for you, the high-end bottles, or luxury market is a different animal?
No, it's a different market. We provide these kind of wines as a service to our customers. We do not focus on it. We focus on our brands, branded products. But we have the chance that with the 300 years of history, we have in our cellars wines dating back to 1881. We have 5 bottles of 1881 Leoville Barton. And we have a bunker built by our German friends during the Second World War in our garden, because they used Chateau Magnol, so our office, as the commandant tour during the war. And we are using their bunker to store our own wines. And we have about 12,000 bottles of wines dating back to 1881. So it's a fantastic treasure that we have. On top of that, we sell a few cases here and there of, Chateau Margaux, Chateau Lafite, Chateau Mouton. Due to the fact that during almost 50 years, when we were supplying the wines to New York, B&G would technically buy the wines that were supplied to Chateau Estates in America. Since, of course, we are not with Diageo anymore, we stopped this business, but we kept a little bit of activity as a service to our customers.
Now, I have someone here, Paula Brazuna, saying that she visited Chateau Magnol in 2005 and concluded a Bordeaux wine course, and that was unforgettable. So you're investing in education too.
Yeah, unfortunately, Chateau Magnol is on hold for the moment. We had to make the decision not to welcome anybody because of the COVID, which is very sad. But it's a place where we usually welcome about 500 people every year to learn about wines. I would say to be injected with B&G wines. We really want to we really want to make sure that they are inducted with the wine, and we try to educate at B&G. We try to educate the consumer, and we are trying to educate, of course, people who want to be educated. So trade people or even journalists who are not so specialized in Bordeaux, want to understand more about Bordeaux wines, about French wines. We are happy to welcome them in Chateau Magnol and teach them. When I say we want to educate the consumer, as you said, all wines cover from the basic, very basic wines to the Grand Cru Classé. And basically, you can discover every step of French wines with B&G. So B&G is my passport to French wines. You can understand the French appellations, the French system by tasting and drinking B&G. That's how we are organized.
Well, I think the people who are watching will agree with me that in Brazil, the main barrier to French wines, education. People are a little bit afraid of buying Bordeaux or French wines. They cannot pronounce the names. It's easier to buy in Portuguese because they have the same idiom, or South American because it's so easy. You buy the grape, you buy Cabernet, or you buy Chardonnay. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things we've understood a long time ago. So basically, our response to this was that in the 80s, B&G was, so first of all, we don't say Barton Guestier because it's too difficult to pronounce in in American or in Brazilian or whatever. So everybody says B&G. That's much simpler to pronounce. That's one thing. The other thing we do is that in the 80s, we were the first company to actually plant single grape vineyards in the south of France. So, for example, between Béziers and Nîmes, we planted vineyards with Merlot, we planted vineyards with Cabernet Sauvignon, we planted vineyards with Chardonnay, and we started to produce varietal wines. So you can access French wines now with B&G by drinking Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot and Chardonnay, for example. So that's the first step to discover French wines. And then when you understand a little bit better the difference between the Cabernet Sauvignon and the Merlot, we offer the possibility to switch to Bordeaux or Saint-Emilion or Côte du Rhône and experiment varietal blends. You know, Bordeaux has always been a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, and the Côte du Rhône has always been a blend of Grenache and Syrah, for example. The difference is that in France and in the old world in general, Italy, Spain, and France, we don't call our wines by the grape, we call our wines by the village the wine is coming from. So we don't say Sauvignon Blanc, we say this white wine is coming from the village of Sancerre. It happens to be Sauvignon Blanc grapes, but it's actually produced with, it's actually coming from Sancerre. And the French really develop their business on the French market by calling the wines by the appellation and not by the grape. When the New World growers came to Bordeaux, came to Burgundy last century or 2 centuries ago, they pick vineyards. So they pick a plant of Merlot, they pick a plant of Cabernet Sauvignon, or Chardonnay, or Pinot Noir, or whatever. They came back to the country, they planted the vineyard there, and then they started to produce wine with only one varietal, and they had no village to call it from. So they started to call the white wine, this is a Chardonnay wine, and they started to call the red, oh, this is a Cabernet Sauvignon wine, or this is a Merlot wine. And they created a market for varietal wines. And those New World markets developed as a single varietal business. And today, you go to America, you go to Brazil, you go to everywhere, people call the wines by the grapes, not by the appellations. So it's only in the 1980s that the French understood that the world was going to shift from an appellation market to a varietal market. And they started to adapt. But today it's our strength. Today we still have the varietals on one side, and we also produce our appellations. And the more you trade up, the more you evolve and the more you progress in your wine understanding, the more you go towards appellation because it has more complexity, because then you start to look at also at the weather, you know, the climate, and what we call the terroir.
I think it's an important and essential movement to offer the consumers the opportunity to buy French wines by the grape. That's very important to the consumer. And I see also Paulo participating a lot here, saying the labels showing Chardonnay, for example, was unacceptable in France, and now it's a strength. It helps to sell wine. And I'm going to tell you a story. I see my father entering the live here. He's watching. And my father has a hierarchy to wines. And it's he's over 80. And it's a lot of the thinking of the old consumers in Brazil. Best wines are, no matter the brand or the price, best wines are French. Second best wines, imported. Third, Brazilian. That's his hierarchy. So France has a strong brand in the name, France. French wines, just for being French, has an advantage. But the difficult is for the beginner consumers to pronounce the names or to navigate into the appellations or hierarchies. Could you please explain to us just a little bit of the classification of Bordeaux? I know it's complex, but
it's complex, yes and no. In fact, what you have to understand is, okay, if you want to look into details, Bordeaux is 110,000 hectares. It produces about close to 700 million bottles per year. at the moment. 1/3 is exported and 2/3 are staying on the French market. So it makes, just with the Bordeaux appellation, a vineyard which is almost bigger than the whole of Australia in terms of production. So it's a very, very big market. As I said, 2/3 of the wine is staying on the French market, 1/3 is exported. And up to recently, the main market was China for us. This has changed a lot in the last 3 years, and I will come back to it. Now, in terms of the way the vineyard is organized, you basically have two sides. You have the left bank and the right bank. This is very simple. You have a river coming from the Pyrenees, which is a chain of mountains, and that goes to the ocean. On the left side, which is the flat, all the gravels and the sand is staying there. The gravels are coming from the Pyrenees. On the right bank, it's a hilly side, so it's very high, and it's clay and limestone. And what the Bordelais were good at doing is that they understood, in the last 2,000 years of existence of the vineyard, they understood how to split and how to adapt the varietal and the soil. So, for example, on the right bank, which is very hilly, it's clay limestone. You will grow Merlot and Cabernet Franc. On the left bank, which is more gravels and sand, you will grow Cabernet Sauvignon. So that's very simple. Okay. Now, if you take the city of Bordeaux, the northern part is Médoc, the eastern part is Saint-Émilion, and that basically gives you the general trend of style. If you want to go into details, you have up to 54 appellations just in Bordeaux. So it's enormous. But basically, you need to know 4 or 5, and then you will understand roughly what makes the different styles of Bordeaux. You have the Médoc and the Cabernet Sauvignon, which gives very strong wines, very tannic wines, very long aging. You have the Saint-Émilion style, which is more round, but also more high in alcohol. You have the Grave on the south, which give you more elegant wines. And then, of course, I'm talking about the reds, but today Bordeaux production is about 80% red. If you were talking 50 years ago, Bordeaux was 80% white. So it was a switch from white wine to red wines production in the space of 40 years.
And don't forget Sauternes, the sweet wine.
And I don't forget Sauternes. Sauternes is a very specific area. It's quite unique in the world. Sauternes is a late harvest white wine. And Sauternes is happening thanks to one small river called the Ciron. And this river is also coming from the Pyrenees, but it doesn't take the same track than the main river. It's a narrow, very narrow river, which stays under wood all the time. It's always in the shadow, and the water is pretty cold. And when this water meets the main river, at the river meet, you have a lot of fog creating during the months of October and November. And this fog will help the botrytis to develop during the harvest time, and that is what is creating the noble rot, which makes this very, very sweet and unique wine. It's a fantastic story to talk about Sauternes, but it would take at least 1 hour to explain how Sauternes works.
I'm a Sauternes lover. Well, folks, my friends who are watching, he mentioned Bordeaux produces about 700 million liters. Just to give an idea, this is about the whole production of Portugal. And he mentioned that Bordeaux has about 50 appellations, and Portugal altogether has about 30. So Bordeaux itself it's a producing country, and as importance, Bordeaux is far the most important wine region in the world because of its history, because of the quality of the high-level wines. Is #1 region in the luxury market by far, I think. In number of wines, in prices, maybe Bourgogne is fighting, but as a whole, Bordeaux is the most important region in the whole ends. The luxury wines, of course, the entry-level wines, and Bordeaux has good wines to all the tastes: white, reds, and sweet wines. Bordeaux produces sparkling wines?
Yes, we do have, and actually B&G as well. We have a Crément, which is in fact the same way of producing sparkling wine than champagne. So it means that the grapes have to be picked by hand. Then you start to produce what we call a base wine, which is a low alcohol, 10% alcohol wine, still wine. And then you put this still wine in a bottle, and in the bottle you add a mix of yeast and sugar, and you close it with a beer cap. And then you wait for a few weeks, and then the second fermentation will happen in the bottle, creating the pressure, creating CO2. The yeast will eat the sugar. It will add probably 1 or 2% of alcohol, so your Crément will go from 10% to 11.5% in terms of alcohol content. The sugar will disappear because it will be eaten by the yeast and will produce CO2. So that's why you have the pressure. And after putting the bottles and moving the bottles upside down, all the dead yeast will come to the neck of the bottle. You will freeze the neck of the bottle. A small ice cube will be created at the neck of the bottle. Inside the ice cube, all the dead yeast will be contained. You remove the beer cap, you eject the ice cube with all the dead yeast inside, and you replace the missing wine by what we call liqueur d'expédition, which is a shipping liquor, in which you decide on the quantity of sugar you want to add to your wine, making it a brut, a demi-sec, or a sweet Crément. And since it's the same system as Crément, as a champagne, except that instead of coming from the Champagne region, it's coming from Bordeaux. That's why we call it Crément de Bordeaux. So Crément exists in Burgundy, it exists also in the Loire Valley.
And we didn't mention the rosé wines. Is it a trend in sales for Barton Guestier, the rosés?
The rosés are a big trend for us. Actually, our two biggest SKUs right now are Rosé de Provence and Rosé d'Anjou. We sell actually more Rosé d'Anjou than we sell Bordeaux Red altogether in the company, which is quite incredible. Rosé is a big trend, and actually, if you look at the development of French wines at export in the last 5 years, most of the growth is explained by the growth of rosé and sparkling wine. So in Bordeaux, we produce the rosé also. It's a very tiny part of the production. But in Bordeaux, the rosé we produce is a kind of a leftover of the production of the red. If you want to concentrate your color on the red wine during the vinification, you open the vat during the vinification, you let some juice go down, and this juice is pink, and it's actually rosé. And you can sell it as such. In Provence, it's a different way. You produce a white wine which has a little bit of color, and it's also called rosé. But it's the way you produce the wine is different.
Well, let's taste the wines. I was starting with Barton Guestier Bordeaux. We are lucky to taste vintage 2016. It's a great vintage, right?
Absolutely. 16 was a very, very good vintage. Actually, 16 is coming, it's in a series of very nice vintages. Just before one difficult one, which is 17. But 15 was a good year. 14 was also a good year. And in fact, I would say that in the last 30 years, we had a lot of good vintages in Bordeaux, much more than in the past. You know, when I was born, it was in the 70s, actually a bit earlier. There was only 1 or 2 vintages good per decade. Today, we have like 6 or 7 good vintages per decade. So it's much better today. It's because of the global warming, but also because we masterize the techniques much better in terms of vinification and treatments.
I have 2 good questions here from Elias. First, how climate change is affecting Bordeaux? And then...
yes, go ahead.
And then you had new authorized grapes, like Alvarinho and Touriga Nacional. Are you planning to use in Barton Guestier?
Not yet. Not yet. No, I know that there are some tries for new varietals in Bordeaux, but it's not really what we do at B&G. What is true is that it's the global warming is affecting the quality of Bordeaux wines because it enhances the alcohol content. And today it's not rare to harvest Merlot with sometimes 16, 17, 18% alcohol content. It's a big problem because we cannot find any yeast that actually can handle such an amount of alcohol. Because you know the yeast, it's a little animal that you put inside the vat to transform the sugar of the juice into alcohol. And if the alcohol content is too high, the yeast is dying just before even starting to transform. And most of the time, the yeast can accept to transform the wine up to 15%. After over 15, it doesn't transform. So what happens is that up to 15, the yeast works, and then it dies, and you still have the equivalent of 2 or 3 alcohol degrees in the vat, which makes like 26, 30 grams of residual sugar in the vat. And in Bordeaux, by regulation, by law, you cannot have more than 4 grams. So it's creating a big problem. So you need to find a way to finish the vat.
Can you add water?
No.
Yes, problem.
It's a problem. So the only way is actually to blend this vat with a vat with lower alcohol content to leverage and make sure that you have overall a vat which is not going over 50% alcohol. If not, you may have problems. First of all, to finish the first fermentation, and sometimes even to start the second fermentation. The malolactic doesn't want to start because the alcohol content is too high. So it's a real problem, and this is how global warming is affecting. And actually, one way to change that is that we remove Merlot and we plant Cabernet Sauvignon, which is a grape that is maturing less fast and usually gives a lower alcohol content. You have to understand that the Cabernet Sauvignon skin is extremely thick. You know, when you press a grain, a bunch of grapes, the juice is white. Even if it's a red grape, the juice is white. All the color is contained in the skin. And the Cabernet Sauvignon has a very thick skin. So one way to actually make sure that the Cabernet Sauvignon gets ripe is to grow it on gravels. This is why the French, and especially the Bordelais, understood that Cabernet Sauvignon has to be grown on gravels and sand, and the Merlot is on clay and limestone. But this very thick skin is also one way to have a wine which will have a lower alcohol content, even if you have a global warming.
Okay, let's talk about the Bordeaux. Thomas Barton.
Yeah.
Bordeaux. I'm very impressed. It's an entry-level wine, but it's delicious. It's very good.
Thank you. So Thomas Barton is actually a range that we developed about 15 years ago at B&G. It's a range dedicated to on-trade and to specialized shops. So the B&G label will be for supermarkets or high powder azúcar, for example, or other chains like that. And Thomas Barton is reserved for the on-trade. So what we do with Thomas Barton is we have a better selection of our growers. We go into a more selective vineyards. We work with growers that apply lower yields. We have a longer aging in oak barrels, and we are stricter on the selection of the grapes. That's the definition of Thomas Barton compared to the normal B&G.
I'm seeing here, sorry, it's 60% Merlot and 40 Cabernet, right? A little bit more Merlot than Cabernet.
Absolutely, it's typically the blend that we use in Bordeaux. So we source the grapes in different places. The Merlot will be produced in the northern east part of Bordeaux on the right bank, close to the Côte de Bourg area. Okay. It's a very hilly place, beautiful for the Merlot. and also a cool place. So actually the Merlot doesn't get too high in terms of alcohol. And then we blend it with Cabernet Sauvignon that we find in the Entre deux Mers. So I was not so precise earlier on when I said Bordeaux is split in two parts. You have the left bank and the right bank. In fact, you have a big island in between those two banks, and that we call Entre deux Mers, between two seas. Because don't forget, in Bordeaux, we are only 70, 80 kilometers from the ocean, and we actually have a tide. The river in Bordeaux has a tide, low tide and high tide, so it changes twice a day. So we don't call it river, we call it a sea. So we have the sea Garonne and we have the sea Dordogne, and between the two, it's called Entre deux Mers, between the two seas.
And if you that watching don't know, Bordeaux means Bordelot, so near the water.
Yeah.
So the Bordeaux 2016, I find it very, very pleasant, fruity, gastronomic, it's very fresh, good acidity. Tannins are soft but present. Young 2016, excellent vintage. Entry price, good quality, consistent. I'm amazed. I didn't know this wine. Haven't tasted before.
And the very interesting thing about Thomas Barton is it's a wine that is also designed to age. So we are trying to have wines accessible quite young. But if you want to keep them for 10 years in the bottle, they will hold pretty well.
I think it has some potential age. And now,
so first of all,
sorry.
First of all, we use good quality corks.
Okay.
Also, that is needed to age the wine. And one thing I wanted to show you is the shape of the bottle, which is quite interesting. It's a quite short bottle, but very wide shoulders. So why do we have wide shoulders? It's because when the wine is, resting on the side like this to age, you will have a deposit. All the tannic wines will have deposit. And when you pour the wine in the glass, you want to make sure the deposit stays on the shoulder and doesn't go in the glass. That's why we're using, very wide shoulders to actually avoid the settlements to go in the glass. The other particularity is the short cap, you can see here. So actually, when the wine is corked, you can see the state of the cork because the cork is actually longer than the cap. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good hints. And I was tasting then Thomas Barton Saint-Emilion, also 16 vintage, great vintage. And this is much more Merlot, 75% Merlot, 25% Cabernet Franc. From the right bank, Saint-Emilion.
Absolutely. So in Saint-Emilion, as I explained earlier on, the right bank is clay and limestone. You have no gravels. So the Cabernet Sauvignon doesn't get ripe on the east bank because the Cabernet Sauvignon, with this very thick skin, requires the reflection of the soil to ripen. So since you have no gravels, the Cabernet Sauvignon doesn't get ripe on the right bank. So we grow Cabernet Franc instead, which is a Cabernet also with a lighter skin, and that goes extremely well on this clay and limestone soil. So Saint-Emilion it's like Châteauneuf-du-Pape. It's a place where the monks planted the vineyards 2,000 years ago, like in Pomerol, and we learn how to make wine with them.
Saint-Emilion is a very beautiful village, and it's the land of Merlot. And this is quite smooth, good middle palate, lots of fruits, darker fruits. And I observed that all the wines, the three wines I'm tasting, have 13.5 of alcohol. The alcohol is not high at all for this vintage, which is a warm vintage.
Yes, we are really trying to have as I said, drinkable wines. Even if you have tasted Chateau Magnol in that you bought in an airport, because we sell a lot of Chateau Magnol in the airports, which is our estate. What everybody says about BNG wines is that those wines are drinkable. It's not a wine to collect. It's a wine to drink, to enjoy. And actually, it's better to have to want to have a second glass, because the wine goes very well with the food and is not overpowering the food. So this requires a balance between the alcohol content and the acidity on one side. If you have too much alcohol, the wine will taste sweet. If you have too much tannins, the wine will taste bitter. So it's always a question of balance between alcohol content, tannins, and acidity.
Well, I see the Saint-Emilion with more body, more mid palate, but at the same time, easier to drink than the basic Bordeaux because it has a little bit less tannins and less acidity. Of course, the Cabernet Sauvignon is playing that role in the Bordeaux.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And now, you want to make comments on the tastings of the Bordeaux and Saint-Emilion before you go to Medoc?
No, I think that's okay. I mean, you know, it's the typical Bordeaux aromas of red berries and oak, because the wines are aging for 8 to 12 months on the appellation in oak barrels. We renew the oak barrels by a third, so it means that 1/3 of the wine is going into new oak barrels, 1/3 of the wine is aging into 1-year-old barrels, and the last third is aging in 2 years. And of course, the older the barrel, the less oak taste it gives. But the barrel has two functions. The first function is to give oak taste, but the second function, which is even more important, is to break the molecules of tannins and make them softer. The tannin is a molecule that makes it's a protein that makes your saliva precipitate. That's why you have the impression of harshness on the palate, you know, like having a chalk on the tongue. And by providing a micro-oxygenation with the barrel, it breaks this protein into smaller proteins, and it loses this impression of harshness and of chalkiness. So that's the second function of the barrel. The first function is the oak taste. Second function is the micro-oxygenation to hide this impression of chalkiness.
Well, we have a question here from Jean Baptiste. He's asking how the pandemic is affecting, if it will cause problems on the crop in France in several regions. So you are producing wines in many regions, you can say.
No, in terms of production, it has not affected us, and I have to say that the guys who worked in the vineyards in March and April, when everybody was confined at home, we were so jealous that they could go out and enjoy the beautiful weather and work in the vineyards. No, but they were very courageous because you know, some of them, of course, they were working on their own in the vineyards and had no risk of catching the virus. But for the guys working on the bottling lines, that's another story, because they have a lot of colleagues around, and that was a bit risky to come and work. But they worked actually extremely hard because the French supermarkets were asking for a lot of wine, and we had to produce a lot. Not necessarily BNG, but our parent company was bottling a lot of wine at the time. So they worked very hard, very hard. No, it has the COVID has not affected the production. It has affected the loading of the containers, because when you want to load a container by hand, you know, you cannot have more than one guy loading at the same time. And I tell you, when you load a container on your own, it takes some hours. So that's a big problem. But apart from that, there was no problem. Actually, the cork suppliers were okay. The bottle suppliers were okay as well. And in terms of production of the wine, there was no problem. It's more a question of sales and of course on trade was a big issue. On trade and travel retail is a big issue.
Thank you. I have a question here from Guilherme. He's asking if Hubert de Bois from Angelus is already working with you.
Yes, Hubert is advising us on Chateau Magnol. As you understand, Chateau Magnol is the only vineyard we own. All the other vineyards, these are partners. Chateau Magnol, we own this vineyard. It's 30 hectares. We produce about 15,000 cases of wine every year. And we sell 75% of Chateau Magnol in travel retail, in airports and cruise lines and so on. And Hubert has been advising us for 3 years now, since the 15 vintage, 4 years, on Chateau Magnol, to not really to change the style of the wine. That was not the idea. The first idea was because Bernard, the winemaker, in 2015 went on retirement, and we needed to have some people that would, make sure that the style will go on. And Hubert was the ideal guy to help us go through this step with the new winemaker we have today. And on top of that, he's giving us access to journalists, which is also very good. And of course, giving us a lot of good advice on how to, how to treat, how to harvest, how to produce the wine, and so on. But it has not really changed the style of the wine, which is great, because sometimes in the old times when you were taking an advisor, you would change, the style of your wine. Hubert was not his way. His way is to just make it a slightly bit better, really helping rather than changing.
Great. Well, let's taste the Médoc. Last wine of our tasting. 2016. Also 13.5 of alcohol. You just have a bigger glass, a Bordeaux type.
16 was a very good vintage in the Médoc, actually more approachable than 15. 15 was a bit harsh, but 16 was really good. And actually the quality of the Merlot, even though it's only 25% Merlot, the quality of the Merlot in the 16 vintage has changed a lot the perception of the Médoc. Médoc is a very austere appellation most of the time, because the wines need to age. As I explained, it needs to age in barrels longer, because the tannins contained in the Cabernet are very, very harsh. So you need more time in the aging in the barrel. And you need also more time in the bottle to have a wine which is more drinkable. But Médoc is one of the best values, I would say, in the market today, simply because there is less demand, and also because the average size of an estate in Saint-Emilion is 5 hectares. The average size of an estate in Médoc is 50 hectares. And of course, it's easier to sell the equivalent of 5 hectares than to sell the equivalent of 50 hectares. So the prices are not the same. And at equivalent quality, usually Saint-Emilion is much more expensive than Médoc.
I just got a message from folks from Interfood, Todovino, saying that those wines are in promotion in the website, todovino.com.br. And so they are already good buys, now even better. I find
Muito obrigado.
I find that the Médoc, I feel a lot of Merlot on this Médoc. I see it's 60% Cabernet, 40% Merlot. But the sensation that I have from this wine is more from the Merlot, the fruit, the mid palate, full wine. Of course, more tannins than the other previous two. And now I got the message here, 40% off in Todovino, the wines, okay? Good, go there.
Okay. So the expression of the Merlot was really very nice in the 16 vintage. It was very, very expressive. We have a very high-end Thomas Barton, which is an icon wine we call Réserve Privée. And there, we went up to 50% in the Merlot blend. It's a Médoc as well, but a higher selection.
Okay.
And we went up to 50% because the 16 vintage was fantastic with the Merlot.
So I especially recommend those wines with the promotion, 40% off, and 16 vintage, which is a great vintage. So good opportunity. I think, how many years do you think this Médoc 16 can age?
I think another 5 years.
Yes, I think 5 years for all of them, and Médoc maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, Médoc maybe a little bit more. But also now I said, well, when I, sometimes have a bottle of wine with my mother on a Sunday, she likes wines which are 20 years old, and I like wines which are 5 years old. So it's also a question of personal taste. And actually the Médoc, even if it's maybe 20 years, of course, the fruit will have gone, but it will become into a very pleasant drink. It will be slightly different from what people like today, because of course what you drink in South America or whatever is always full of fruit and so on. But these are wines that can age for 20 years and they are still very interesting.
Thank you. I have two more questions. We have still 10 minutes. Well, another question from Elias. He is asking about sustainability. How are you dealing with that?
So sustainability is at the heart of our thinking today, not only at BNG but also in Bordeaux, because in the recent news, of course, you have to understand that the vineyard of Bordeaux is all around the city. So 20 years ago, the vineyards were far away from the houses of people. But now the houses are getting further and further from the city center. And of course, now people are starting to build inside the vineyards. And of course, they complain when we spray. You know? So sustainability is now at the extremely important. And most of the Bordeaux vineyard is becoming what we call HVE3. And most of the shops in France want to have HVE3, which is not really organic, but almost. When I say not really organic, is that you have to understand something. Bordeaux climate during the winter and during the spring is extremely wet. And when you have a wet climate, you have mildew coming on the grapes, and mildew can destroy everything. It can destroy the whole crop. And when I say that Bordeaux is producing 700 million bottles a year, we sell those bottles. And if 1 year, because we had mildew, we can produce only 50 million, it means that 650 million bottles are missing. And nobody's happy about the situation. So we cannot afford not to produce. So we are limiting the spray. We don't use any bad or forbidden products. We don't use things to remove grass, like Monsanto products or whatever. Sorry for the advertising. But we still have to use one product which is not organic, which is a product that will go inside the leaf to protect the leaf from the mildew. If we were organic, we could not use this product, and then the vineyard will be destroyed every year. So we chose not to go organic. And if you look at the percentage of organic products in Bordeaux, it's about 5% of the production, because people cannot really afford. And I know a lot of vineyards who actually went to organic, and 5, 6, 7 years later, they come back to traditional because they have lost so many crops. They are on the verge of bankruptcy.
Yes, Bordeaux is a rainy region. It's difficult to be organic. It's a rainy region. So
you can be organic in Spain, you can be organic in Languedoc, in south of France. Being organic in Bordeaux is extremely risky. And to be honest, in the way we spray today with the product we use, the risk is extremely, extremely minimal. And when we make the analysis of the product, there is no pesticides, not at all any pesticides. And this contact product, treatment product that we use is really very, very close to what could be organic. But we cannot claim it's organic because we don't have the certification.
Well, Philippe, we have still 7 minutes. One question. China is a very, very important market to Bordeaux. And it was also the center of the coronavirus, COVID. How is the market affected, and how are you going to think it will be the reaction from the near future? Difficult question, I know.
Well, the Chinese market is very interesting. First of all, you have to know that for the last 3 years now, Bordeaux in China is down 40% every year. Mm. So it used to be the #1 market for Bordeaux. It's not anymore. Up to December, it was the US actually, which came back #1. Unfortunately, with the Trump tax, the US is also declining now. So now we are back into the traditional European markets like Belgium, Germany, England, whatever. Anyway, coming back to China, the Chinese market is a very interesting one. I think that only maybe 5%, maybe only 1% of all the wine that has been shipped to China are drunk. I think the Chinese don't drink. And if they drink during big parties organized by the Communist Party. And today this is forbidden. With the new president, with Mr. Jinping. Since he came to the power, he said, no more celebrations using wine. You have to drink tea. So a big part of the consumption of French wines in China was actually happening during these drinking parties. And this is over for the last 6 years. The second aspect was bribery. It was very common to actually offer a bottle of bottled wine to an official to obtain a favor. That was also a big market for French wines. And this is also over. You cannot bribe people anymore, and if you do it, you have to be very careful. So what is left as a market for China, for French wines in China? It's basically the business people. Business people, they love to entertain their customers in private rooms inside restaurants. So they rent a restaurant, but instead of going to the main room and share the table with other people, they take a private room where they have their guests, but they don't trust the wines served by the restaurants. So they bring their own wine. So they go to a shop, they buy the wines at the shop, and they bring the wine to the restaurant. The problem with COVID is that most of business dinners and business lunch have been cancelled. So there is no consumption of them. So you have a small fringe of the population, extremely small fringe of population, which has money, understands about wine, but then they drink the high-end stuff, so all the Chateau Margaux and Lafite and Bechevel. And then all the entry-level wines, there's no market for them anymore. But what happened is that in the meantime, you had a lot of people that made money in the car industry, in the electricity industry in China, who said, you know what, I want to have my own wine. I want to have my own chain of wine shops. So they bought 5, 6, 10 containers of wines in France that they brought to China. They put them in a cellar. They built, I don't know how many, China built how many inbound warehouses. And all the wines have been stored there, and they will never be drunk, never be destroyed.
Well, so
China is a big pipeline that has been filled for 10 years, and there is no output of the pipeline.
Well, so the biggest competition to wine in China is tea. Philippe, one last question, and we have still only 2 minutes. How do you see the Brazilian market?
Well, the Brazilian market is, I would say, more promising on the sparkling side than on the still wines, unfortunately, in the last 10 years. Brazil is, you can look at Brazil, and I'm sure my friends from Interfood are listening to me, so I have to be very careful to what I say. But the market of Brazil is not one market; it's several markets. You have the domestic market that Interfood is building for us, which they do a very good job. And then you have the border shop markets.
We have 1 minute.
Okay. And then you have also the duty free. So altogether, it makes of Brazil a big market. Unfortunately, with the COVID, borders are closed and duty free is closed.
Yes.
So we are left with our good old customers with Interfood. And of course, it's a shrinking market, but it's still a very good market and very promising market. So I'm sure Brazil has a brilliant future in front of us.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated the wines. I hope you liked our chat. People who are watching, thank you very, very much. You're welcome. And remember, 40% off in Todovino, 2016 vintage. I recommend strongly. Thank you, Philippe Marion, director of Barton Guestier. Thank you. And thank you, Todovino and Interfood. Thank you.
Thank you.